And away we go. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. This is Coffee Talk, or at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube, as well as Prepper University on YouTube, and at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, as well as Fistful of Radio. That is fistfulofradio.com, which is a podcasting service out of Atlanta where you can find Coffee Talk Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon, as we get ready to talk about what's going on in the world today and take a look at some of the news snippets. And of course, for those of you who were able to see and not hear, I have Miss Granny Smith here keeping me company for a minute. It's one of the strays that we've taken in. And for those of you who are listening and not able to see, of course, I will read as many of the comments as I can from the live portion on YouTube as is reasonable so that you can keep up with the conversation. And I'll go ahead and acknowledge some of the people that have chimed in thus far. I see Helter is here. I see Delo is here. Dragon, he says, Happy Black Friday. Yeah, indeed. I'm not buying anything. Keisha is here. Urban Angst. Fluke Man. Preparedness Veteran is here. He says, got back just in time. Cuban Nurse Prepper is here. Thanks for joining us today. And Deanna Martin. And a special thanks also to Fluke Man. I want to point out, I did a short earlier. Fluke Man sent 90 pounds, 3 30-pound bags of cat food to us at our P.O. box. Very much appreciated because, just like little Miss Granny Smith here, we take care of a lot of strays. We're currently taking care of 10. So yeah, every little bit helps, and the food goes a long way. The food's a big expense. We go through a lot of it. And funny story about that, before we get into the news, and again, here's little Miss Granny Smith. She's the one that had the broken elbow. Still recovering, little girl. Funny story about picking up the cat food there. And I see Lucky Luciano is here. He says he made it. Yes, you did. I went to the P.O. box to pick up the cat food. And so I bring the yellow slip from the box, and the woman goes back, and then she comes out and gets the other clerk. And so both clerks go into the back room. Then they come out again and ask me if I wouldn't mind coming in the back room and picking it up myself because it's too heavy. The two of them together can't lift the boxes. The boxes are 30 pounds each. And I'm like, two of you can't lift a 30-pound box? Because I don't think I'm supposed to be going back there. But needless to say, I was able to pick it up. And Yahweh 1976 says, nice cat. Yes, indeed. She's a sweetheart. This little Miss Granny Smith here, recovering from a broken elbow. And I've told the story about Granny Smith before. This was a cat that was feral, that was always outdoors, never been indoors except for when she was fixed, because she was a catch and release. But she was limping and someone alerted us to it. So we took her in, has not made a single attempt to even go near an exterior door since we brought her in a couple of months ago. This is a cat who I guess is just always wanted to be a house cat, because she has not even tried to get out. She won't even go through the garage door into the garage like the other cats like to hang out in there sometimes. And Fluke Man says, you're welcome, even though cats think they have to catch food for us. Yeah, I know. I have had cats bring squirrels and such to the back door. Put them and bring them on the porch. But yeah, again, very much appreciated. And I see Johnny Future. He says, Johnny is here. He says, listening while driving. Well, there's a lot to talk about, Johnny. There's a lot to talk about. And, this is something that occurred the other day. It actually was breaking news while we were doing the live broadcast at the Canadian-American border. If I can get this to share properly, here we go. And this comes from the Western Journal. A lot of people were speculating about the explosion that took place on the Rainbow Bridge, but now it says the government walks back terrorism claim after car explodes on U.S.-Canadian border. That's right. Federal Bureau of Investigation said Wednesday night that the agency found no indications of terrorist activity in the vehicle explosion at the Rainbow Bridge US Canada border crossing. FBI Buffalo has concluded our investigation at the scene of the Rainbow Bridge incident. A search of the scene revealed no explosive material and no terrorism nexus was identified, the agency said in a Wednesday news statement shared on social media. The agency said it referred the incident to the Niagara Falls Police Department as a traffic investigation. Now, traffic investigation. Explosion occurred around 11:30 a.m. Wednesday, killing 2 people in the car, officials said, according to MSNBC News. I closed the door to my car, and about 30 feet from me, I seen something airborne. I first thought it was an airplane. It looked like slow motion. I said, my God, it's a car. Ricky Wilson, a witness, told WHEC television. So, I mean, early speculation because of all that's going on in the world is that it was a terrorist attack. Now they're saying it's just a traffic accident. People just screwed up while driving. Can you rely on that? Well, you never know. I mean, we're talking about agencies of government that have been known to be dishonest. It makes me think of the Notre Dame fire or Notre Dame fire when it was burning. And before the fire was even out, they already had the results of the fire and what caused it. And it's like, wow, that was quick. Any other time it would have taken 2 years of investigations. Spectre is here. Glad you could make it today. Preparedness veteran says it looked like a sequence from the Dukes of Hazzard. And Fluke Man says, I'm a small guy, only 5'5", but they can't lift 30 between them. I was going to order you 5 or even 6 bags. It seems like my common sense had kicked in. Hey, I'll take 5 or 6 bags. We go through about 2 pounds a day for just the 10 cats. It goes quick. But yeah, I mean, and you would think that's the kind of job where normally you're required to be able to lift at least 50 pounds. But the 2 women couldn't pick up 1 box. They're like, listen, can you come back here? Would it be okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'll come and get it. You know, and again, I'm not sure I'm supposed to do that, but they sure did let me in. Gary Smith is here, as well as Donna Beaver has joined us, and All People. And a comment here from Robert. He says, FB of intimidation. Have you watched the DHS in front of Congress? What a bunch of baboons. $96 billion for this year goes to a department under the USDA. They make no products. $300,000 car exploded. Yeah, and I got some interesting points about that too that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later on if I have time. If I have time for that. Wow, you are just soaking it up today, aren't you, Granny Smith? You know, wear my arm out here while I'm trying to work this mouse. And Cuban Nurse Prepper says, Northwest Florida, that sounds to me like a covert up here, not to let people know what is really going on. And Helter says, a single car crashed at the Canada-American border. The FBI and the state police are all on the scene, armed and ready to go, but the authorities won't deal with illegals. Boggles my mind. Well, they were told not to deal with that. And speaking of corruption, since I'm headed that way anyways, I'll be the first one to talk about possible government corruption, right? We're going to jump to Maryland here. If the share option will work. Here we go. ASAM News. Maryland hate crime commissioner has been suspended. You want to get down, honey? Okay, come here. There you go. Good girl. Sit right there. Maryland hate crime commissioner has been suspended. This is the hate crime commissioner. She's been suspended for her pro-Palestinian comments now. It says a member of Maryland's commission set up to address hate crimes has been temporarily suspended after accusations she made anti-Semitic remarks. Zainab Chaudhry. Zainab Chaudhry, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the executive director of the Maryland chapter of the Council of American Islamic Relations, posted images of an Israeli flag next to a Nazi symbol with the caption, "That moment when you become what you hated most." The commission launched just a month before the Hamas attacked on Gaza in October. So they just got started. Attorney General Anthony Brown announced the suspension Tuesday and urged commission members to exercise great care in their communications and conduct. Personal postings that could be reasonably perceived as hate speech may disrupt the ability of the commission to accomplish its important work, he said in a statement. No, basically, you look like a bunch of damn hypocrites. If you're going to do the very thing that your commission has been established to work against, then that's corruption, and that's being a hypocrite. But why am I not surprised that a government agency is going to be hypocritical and behave in a corrupt fashion? CAIR, C-A-I-R, says nearly 4,000 people, along with a dozen Muslim groups, have signed a petition calling on Chaudhry to be reinstated. As the only American Muslim on the Attorney General's Hate Crimes Commission, Chaudhry's voice was critical in representing our community concerns to your office, a letter from Chaudhry's supporters to Attorney General Brown read. Even a temporary suspension of her role is harmful and completely unjustified. I think it is justified if it goes against the grain of what the commission was put into place for in the first place. Suspending Chaudhry for criticizing Israeli government's horrific crimes and for expressing solidarity with the Palestinian people is unacceptable. This attack on her is an attack on all of us, and we will not accept it. Don't accept it. What's interesting, though, is the only thing they're concerned with is virtue signaling and checking a box because she's the only American Muslim in the group. Is that qualifications for her having her job? Well, unfortunately, in the modern Western world, it is. In the modern Western world, the fact that she is female and Muslim is the only qualification she needs for the job. Otherwise, she might have had more tact than to post things like that on her social media, considering what her job is. Freedom for All says he found a kitty under his porch yesterday. Oh, I hope you were able to help him. And Preparedness says hate crime minister sacked for hating Jews. That's irony right there. Absolutely. Gary says hate crime commissioner suspended for hate crime. You can't make this stuff up. I know. It's fantastic, isn't it? Shooting fish in a barrel, picking on people in government positions as I do the coffee talk segments. Dragon says, I still find it odd people in high places are not a little more controlled in their public statements, no matter what they say. If it can be taken wrong, it will. Helter says, Chaudhry took on the mantle of the office. That means her private ideas have to be muzzled in deference to the governors. And Preparedness says, soon there'll be that many Muslim voters, the electorate will ensure they get into office. And Flukeman says, far right says, white power, and yet they discriminate Jews. Jews are white, but whatever that they say, yeah. Well, Americanized or primarily European and American ones are mostly white because Eastern European as well, Western European, Eastern and Western European, because they've been there for generations. And if you're in an area like that for long periods of time, your color will fade, so to speak. If you go to the Middle East and you look at Jews, you can't tell them apart from anybody else. And then Robert says, locally here, all new multi-million-dollar aircraft is at our international airport, and all DHS-owned one plane is $7 million. Just a major face slap to operate one aircraft is $2,700 an hour. But I just thought that story was interesting because of what a hypocrite they are. What a hypocrite they are, or that person is. Anyone here from Canada today? This is another one flying under the radar that I think is really interesting, pertains to Canada specifically. Gary says there's a lot of black Jews in the world too. Sammy Davis Jr. was Jewish. Although I think he was a convert, but still. This is a story about Canada coming up here. And this comes from CBS News Canada. Really interesting. He says number of assisted deaths jumped more than 30% in 2022. And they're talking about euthanization, because euthanization is a big thing in Canada now. A new Health Canada report says the number of medically assisted deaths in 2022 was more than 30% higher than the year prior. Medically assisted deaths constituted 4.1% of all deaths in Canada last year, said the report. Published on Tuesday, the report is a comprehensive overview of Canada's medical assistance in dying, or MAID law, and its effects. The law is set to extend access to medical assistance in dying to those whose sole medical condition, is a mental illness in March 2024. So now they're going to include mental illnesses as criteria for euthanization. That's very interesting. That sounds very, very brown shirt. I know that the Nazis, in the height of their fame, are best known for the extermination of the Jewish people, the Hebrew people. But before that, they got rid of all the handicapped people in their country. Handicapped people, homosexuals, anybody like that they could catch up were disposed of. People who were MR, what they used to call mentally retarded, and so on, mentally ill individuals. So they're extending that. And 4.1%, that was their number in 2019. So I'm not sure if they're saying it's saying that that's the current number. I don't think it is. I'm pretty sure, because I looked at earlier statistics, and in 2019 it was 4.1%. Now it's 30% more. So what, 4.5% maybe? So 4.5% roughly of all the people who die in Canada, medically assisted suicide. And the number will increase because now they're going to expand it into people who have mental illnesses as of March of next year. Experts and advocates who spoke with CBS News questioned whether the MAID growth rate and the percentage of deaths should be cause for concern. Some cited perceived gaps in the data. Unbelievable. Flukeman says some Muslims say they tolerate other cultures, religions, etc., but Quran chapter 9 verse 29 says something like attack all non-Muslims until they submit. Is that right? Yeah, that's about correct. Keep in mind what they tell you and how. Don't look at what they say, look at what they do. It's as simple as that. They'll tell you that because they don't want everybody to attack them all at once. They want to act like they want peace. Oh, it's the beautiful Quran is a book of peace and love and all this nonsense. But that's not necessarily obviously not how they act. It's not even how they act towards each other. They're brutal with each other. We talked about this yesterday with Saudi Arabia's NEOM project, the 200-mile apartment building that they're manufacturing out in the desert, and the tens of thousands of indigenous tribes people that they evicted from their natural habitats, their land they've been living on for thousands of years, burned their villages, arrested people, even killed activists. And you didn't see it in the news at all because no one cares when Middle Eastern Muslims kill each other. But it's hardly a religion of peace when you look at it, as opposed to what they tell you. Dragon says they're just trying to get rid of all the people who don't meet their criteria, which is all the locals. They prescribe you meds. Then once you go nuts in the head, they'll ask you if you want MAID. Hey, it could be. Robert says Canada is bad. Vancouver, British Columbia, Hastings, you walk 30 meters and someone is smoking crack or another heroin. A friend is an RCPM, and that's Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Cop, he complains every day, dead in cars and on the sidewalk, overdoses. Interesting. All people said Sammy Davis Jr. and Jane Mansfield were both Satanists. Okay. There you go, all people. Helter says many people who deal with institutions like workers' compensation boards are already at their breaking point. These institutions will likely suggest MAID more often to their clients. Yeah, it's an option and it's legal. Soylent Green, anyone? Because that's where they got a lot of the bodies from, was the euthanization stations, if you recall the film. Robert says fentanyl has a stack of 50 papers on his desk and told there is no problem. And Urban says the callousness of the Canadian government is troubling. At least come up with a better acronym than MAID. Like, yikes, MAID. Maids get hired to clean up someone else's mess, I thought. Indeed. And Robert says last month the stack was 3 inches. But that's what's going on in Canada. And I thought that was interesting. I'm sure a lot of people were aware they had euthanization programs in Canada, but I don't know if anybody realized how involved it actually has become, to the point where you're looking at about roughly 4.5% of all deaths in Canada now are hospital-assisted suicides or medical-assisted suicides. And it will get higher if they're adding mental illness. And if you have a mental illness, do you have the cognitive capacity to legitimately make that decision? Let that sink in. You're talking about someone who, under normal circumstances, not everybody who's mentally ill, obviously, but many people who are mentally ill. Remember, my wife and I used to work in a mental health facility. Nobody that I worked with has the cognitive ability to decide between a blue and a green shirt, let alone assisted suicide. You know, that's a very, very scary thought. Very scary thought. And speaking of medications and medical industry and suicide and all of this, and you know, another pet peeve of mine is the fact that in the United States they're able to advertise for prescription medications, or over-the-counter medications as they're often referred to, and the incredible side effects that these places have. The side effects on some of this medication is insane. This is another one that caught my eye, and I'm going to play a commercial ad for you. I'm going to pull up the screen share. And this is for Rexulti. You may have seen a commercial for this, Rexulti. And I'm going to play this ad, and let me know if you can't hear it properly. I think you should be able to. Listen to what this medication is for and what the side effects are.
My mom's Alzheimer's never changed how much we love her, but it did change her. She developed agitation that may happen with dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. She started yelling, pacing around, kept repeating the same questions. She got agitated often, so we asked her doctor for help.
Rexulti is the only FDA-approved medication proven to reduce agitation symptoms that may happen with dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. Rexulti can cause serious side effects. Elderly dementia patients have increased risk of death or stroke. Report fever, stiff muscles, and confusion, which can be life-threatening, or uncontrolled muscle movements, which may be permanent. High blood sugar, which can lead to coma or death. Weight gain, increased cholesterol, low white blood cells, unusual urges, dizziness on standing, falls, seizures, trouble swallowing, or sleepiness may occur. Take action for your loved one. Ask their doctor about Rexulti.
Unbelievable. Did you get all of that? A couple of comments here before we catch up. Cuban Nurse says Vancouver already
Just
has
between us,
Oh,
you know what's better than
not that
mommy?
ad. cut that out. Sorry about that. Vancouver already has the highest suicide rate because of depression from insufficient vitamin D. Robert says Canada, they import immigration PhD engineers. Teachers can't work, did not go to college in Canada, retrained. They bring drug issues, gangs, and they leech off the system. Canada builds more hospitals. Yeah, so they can euthanize everybody. Flukeman says, so where do they draw the line? There are millions who have lives, families, jobs, and are able to make rational decisions on a daily basis, but have no anxiety. And Deanna says, wow, that was a great cure. Indeed. And Gary says, it's like someone in the big pharma industry is trying to reduce the useless eaters. Why would you want to give your loved one, your elderly dementia patient parent, a medication? It's supposed to reduce their agitation, but it increases their confusion. Their confusion is why they're agitated. They have dementia. How's that going to help? If they're going to be more confused, more agitated. You see where I'm going with this? The confusion is why they're so upset, why they're agitated, why they lash out. Anybody here work with anybody with Alzheimer's or dementia? It's because they can't remember anything and they know it. They know that they didn't recognize something they should have. That's why they're upset. And you're going to give them a medication that's going to increase the confusion, but reduce that agitation somehow. And it's going to give them tremors and uncontrolled muscle spasms that may become permanent. Really? You think that's going to agitate them? Oh, God. That's why I highlight these commercials sometimes. I can't believe anybody would take this stuff. Oh, but they will. They will. These pharmaceutical companies are making billions of dollars. Robert says a few years ago, British Columbia government sold out to having a German government build a bridge, charges tolls. They fired all Canadian companies and brought in men from Bosnia to build it. Wow. And preparedness says medication for the elderly that could cause people to fall should be considered deeply. On balance, a fall could be the worst outcome. Yeah, they could break bones. They could be killed. That's an excellent point. And Urban Angst says it's an advertisement for the perfect pharma drug. It alleviates the same symptoms that it causes. Genius marketing. That's right. And people will buy it. People will buy it. They're frustrated. They don't want to work with them. I'm sick of working with mom. She's a pain in the ass. She argues all the time. She can't remember nothing. She didn't recognize me the other day. Here, take some pills. Because that's always the shortcut answer. Here, swallow some pills and shut up. Fluke Man says, I mean, they do have anxiety. My sister, mom, and I have anxiety, but we have common sense and general knowledge. And Mountain Man Mike says, my boss was an orderly at the Bethesda psych ward during Vietnam. Interesting stories. And there's Yuckster. And he says, why don't they create a year in medicine with a side effect of penis enlargement? I don't know. Well, they did. Remember, that's how they discovered Viagra. Well, it was supposed to be a heart medication, and the side effect was erections. And when they found out something was wrong, it was like, hey, it's not doing what it's supposed to, but everybody's getting erections. Let's recall the medication. And all the test patients, the test subjects, refused to return it. I remember reading the story back in the 90s. Anyways, Helter says doctors keep prescribing SSRIs for anxiety. It just doesn't make sense. None of them work. All it does is induces nasty side effects. Yeah. And Mountain Man says, now Walter Reed. But that's I don't trust any of these. I cannot personally recommend people take any pharmaceuticals unless there's no other alternative and you're absolutely sure you know what you're doing. And do not rely on your doctor or pharmacist to know what these medications are and what they do and what the side effects are. If they find out anything, they're going to do the same Google search that you will. They don't know this stuff anymore. The days of true pharmacists are gone. where you would go to the local drugstore and the guy would get out the mortar and pestle and grind you up a mixture. Here, bring this back to your mom. Tell her to put a tablespoon in a glass of warm water. Whatever. Those days are done. All right. Those days are done. These guys are pill counters. They don't know what this shit does. And they print off the thing, read a couple of bullet points to you to cover liability, and expect you to do the rest. Deanna says the heart medicine that gives heart attacks. Hopefully not. And Gary says, hit the like button. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, I absolutely do appreciate it when people hit the like button. Now, speaking of corruption, this is another one, and this comes from Patch. Well, one more here from Urban. He says, on a serious note, Viagra can be dangerous for folks with a heart condition or other circulatory issues. Okay. For any of you who are using Viagra, keep that in mind. This comes from a news agency called Patch. The Fall of Minneapolis, 5 Things to Know About George Floyd documentary. Now, this has been in the news a lot lately, and that's the George Floyd documentary, which I have taken a look at. And it's very telling and very damning of how all this was handled, how the whole thing was handled. And he even ties in things from Trayvon Martin. You remember Trayvon Martin? And I recommend finding this documentary and checking it out if you're into this sort of thing. We've all been lied to up and down. We knew this anyways, that we were lied to. This guy actually went out and did the research and presented it to prove that we were all lied to. And we have people sitting in jail for nothing. And riots happened for nothing. And he ties it back to Trayvon Martin, because that's really where this starts. It says, Minneapolis, a new documentary called The Fall of Minneapolis seeks to dispel what its producers call false narratives surrounding the death of George Floyd and the convictions of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin and 3 of his former colleagues. It says, bystander video of Floyd's May 2020 death quickly went viral and sparked violent riots in Minneapolis and protests across the globe. His death led to large cultural and political shifts in the U.S., which we're still suffering under, especially on topics concerning race and policing. And it gives you some bullet points. It says 5 things to know about the Fall of Minneapolis. These are not what I got out of this documentary, and I'll tell you what I got out of it in a second. It says it's produced by a local conservative outlet. Documentary makes controversial claims, including that Minneapolis police were ordered not to stop the riots. I've heard that. Chauvin was following current Minneapolis police protocol when he placed his knee on Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. FBI altered the autopsy. Minnesota Democrats and prosecutors rushed to judgment to prosecute 4 officers. EMTs took 20 minutes to arrive, despite officers at the scene calling immediately and there being an ambulance bay 8 blocks away. The problem with the EMTs taking 20 minutes to get there is because they went to the wrong address. You know how sometimes you have say Washington Street, Washington Boulevard, Washington Corner, something like that. They went to the wrong one. It says documentary features Collins' interview with Chauvin from a federal prison. In it, Chauvin tells Collins he was simply following his training during Floyd's arrest, so on and so forth. Now, what's really interesting about the documentary is how incredibly dishonest the legal system is in it. That's what stood out for me. Wash the rest of it away. I almost don't even care how the people who were interviewed perjured themselves. You had the mayor. Oh, I love the video clip of the mayor at Floyd's funeral on one knee with his hand on the coffin like this, pretending to cry, bobbing his head. Absolutely sickening display of box checking, basically. But anyways, you had a coroner on the stand give an account that does not match the coroner's report. You had the chief of police and the chief trainer say that they don't train police officers to do that, but the training manuals from that time period, and every police officer they spoke to said, yeah, that is the training. The knee protocol is the training, and it matches exactly the footage that is in the video, the guy's knee placement, and also how the officer's camera cuts off as they get into the ambulance, and they're showing that he wasn't being given oxygen. But they only just got him in there, and the paramedic is taking the hose and mask out. All of that stuff is used once. He has to unwrap it, unroll it, hook it up, and then put it on. But the video cuts off before he does that because he was administered oxygen. But it implies, the way the video was cut off in court, that he didn't. The confrontation prior to that wasn't shown. His other arrests, video footage of his other arrests, which are public record now, prior to this incident, where he was arrested, fell out, had to go to the hospital. He's done this before and been revived at the hospital. Was not admissible in court. And then backing up to Trayvon Martin, and I thought this was really interesting. I'll read a couple of comments here really quick before I mention Trayvon Martin. Robert says, a great channel, Father in Exile, talking about police corruption in the court where immunity is stripped. And Fluke Man says, think cops has a reputation going on the wrong house, and yet pizza guys never get lost. Yeah. And All People has a few things to say about George Floyd and Trayvon Martin. Yeah, they were connected to the Bloods, Crips founders. That's true. And that's brought up in this documentary as well. The thing with Trayvon Martin, he mentions it because he ties that together, and he ties in BLM to it as well in the documentary. Diamond, the girlfriend in Trayvon Martin's instance. Now, remember, we have law enforcement officials, coroner's office people perjuring themselves in court and getting away with it. The district attorney in the Trayvon Martin case, which I thought was really interesting. I know I keep saying that. The girlfriend, Diamond, on the stand, that's not her. That's not her. It's a different woman entirely than the girlfriend, because Diamond has come forward since after the trial and has been interviewed. I don't know who that woman is. That woman now, who was on the stand claiming to be Diamond, that was placed there by the DA, who is a mentally challenged individual, now says she was coerced by the family and by the district attorney's office, and that the family, really all they were after was suing the HOA because they thought they were going to get a check. She was not Diamond. She was coerced into pretending to be Diamond and gave false testimony under the direction of the district attorney's office. My point, you want me to trust the justice system? You want me to trust this? This is South America banana republic shit going on in our court systems to manipulate people, to manipulate the media, and to manipulate political position. And I'm supposed to trust the justice system. Are you kidding me? That's my takeaway, is how many state, county, and other government officials lied on the stand. If I did that, I'd get a year for perjury. Oh, but nobody even investigates them, right? Merv says it looked like an undercover breaking out of the windows of the AutoZone in Minneapolis to get the riot started and blocks of bricks being put in place. Yeah, I've heard that. Helter says there's obviously a bigger shady force at play regarding the case. Underneath that is the top-down corruption all the way to the president and whoever is telling him what to do. And Booger says, good afternoon, just got the, wow. And I do those notifications early. I set those up early. Today I was a little later than normal, but on most days I'm doing it between 6 and 7 a.m. Unbelievable. Well, glad you could make it, Boogers. Dragon says the Soros-funded protests. Yeah, and he's got his hand in there. Race baiting and using one community to destroy the other kind of all fall into what I think is a greater agenda of degradation of the United States. And Robert says American terror manufactured by the FBI can find on archive good video as well. And Julia Davis, The Terror Within. Now, this guy stumbled over Diamond, the guy who did this documentary. And again, it's The Fall of Minneapolis. I recommend finding it and checking it out. Hopefully you can find it for free. I would, because I wouldn't want to tell anybody to buy anything, honestly, but hopefully you can find it for free. And Jason Whitlock, who has a YouTube channel, interviewed the guy who did this documentary. The way he found out about it was because all of Trayvon Martin's text messages are public record now. So he went to the archives and pulled them up and then said, who the hell is this girl? That's not Diamond, or is it? Yeah, the girl in the text messages and the photos was the real Diamond. And again, the one that was on the stand was a fraud, someone that the DA hired, a mentally ill woman. She's MR, as they used to say, mentally retarded or kind of Down syndrome-ish. Coerced her and put her on the stand to pretend to be that girl to follow the narrative. That is scary. Urban says when the legal system is corrupted past the equilibrium point, you get Dublin. Yeah, speaking of which, I got Dublin on the agenda here to talk about. And all people is talking about the key witnesses. Trayvon Martin was a Haitian migrant. They just wanted a paycheck. Robert says this good video that came out called The Jones Plantation by a man out of Mexico. And Cuban Nurse says the best example is what's going on with our ex-president in court. Yeah, because they've weaponized it against him. And since Dublin just came up, I'll go ahead and open that now because I do have something. Dublin is on fire. Dublin looks like Paris right now because Paris has been buried or mired in riots for like 4 or 5 years now. This is AFP. Worst unrest in decades hits Dublin, according to the police. And that is what's left of Dublin out there in that one photograph. Yeah, riots in Dublin. But why? Why are they rioting? Well, you're about to find out. A night of torched vehicles and shops looted sparked in Dublin after a knife attack outside a school was of an extraordinary level of violence unseen in decades, police said Friday. The violence started when a group broke through a police cordon Thursday in the area where 3 young children and a woman who were caring for them were injured in a knife attack. Groups went on to torch buses and trams and loot shops in one of Dublin's most famous thoroughfares, O'Connell Street. Garda Commissioner Drew Harris told a press conference in the Irish capital on Friday the multiple Irish police officers were injured in a running battle with the group that stormed the crime scene in Dublin on Thursday night. He said that one officer received a serious injury with numerous other members injured as missiles were thrown at them. Basically rocks and bottles. What we saw last night, here we go, an extraordinary outbreak of violence. These are the scenes we have not seen in decades. Harris said all lines of inquiry are open to determine the motive for the knife attack. Harris said 34 people were arrested after huge destruction by the riotous mob, with 13 shops significantly damaged or subjected to looting. A police cordon was set up around the Irish Parliament building, Leinster House, late on Thursday night, and concerns that the violence could spread. Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar, that doesn't sound like an Irish name, am I wrong? Varadkar said that the protesters who battled police and looted shops were motivated by hate and brought shame on Ireland. Those involved brought shame on Dublin, brought shame on Ireland, and brought shame on their families and themselves, Varadkar told reporters. For his part, Harris blamed a complete lunatic faction driven by far-right ideology for the disorder. We have a complete lunatic hooligan faction driven by far-right ideology. And also then this disruptive tendency engaged in serious violence. You want to tell me the nationality of the person involved in this knife attack that attacked a woman and 3 children? You want to mention that in the article? Why do you think the people out there are so enraged? Because that happened, or because it's been happening and they're fed up and they want the Irish government to do something about it, so they lashed out? Granted, this is not the way to do it, but this is what happened. And you're going to call the riot a hate crime, but not the knife attack. Did I miss something? Did I miss something? Help me out here. Preparedness says the guy was waiting outside the school. The Irish don't mess around. This type of civil justice will escalate as the illegals continue their practices. Wishful thinking. Oh my God, sending prayers to Dublin, Ireland. Been there for a wedding so beautiful. Used to be. Ireland and Scotland, lovely countries, but they're being ruined. They're being ruined. Preparedness says I've spoken to many people about the incident recently. Everyone supports their actions. Not the Irish government, apparently. They're a bunch of hate-mongering, filthy right-wing hooligans, apparently. Gary says, I heard it was an immigrant who did the knifings, but when people complained, the government blamed them, and the riots went from there. That's my understanding of it as well. Urban says, the people who brought shame on Ireland are those who signed the paperwork allowing foreign psychos to live on welfare for decades. Thank you, Urban. And Flukeman says, one of your videos, if governments wanted to fake something, do they have motives, means, and etc.? The P Nation attacked I Nation could have been staged by I themselves, not accusing anyone, just saying. Yeah, I mean, any government, most governments have the money, the resources, and the manpower to pull off a lot. But this is what's happened. This is why. Yeah, a foreigner waited out in front of a school. This is what we're hearing. And it was brought up here. It's not mentioned in the article, but one of the commenters mentioned it. Stabbed 4 people, 3 children and a woman. And because this is nothing new, maybe not this severe, but this is nothing new. And Ireland wants to blame the rioters for hate crimes. Dragon says these will show up soon on Fox News as photographic evidence of why liberal policies have failed in Portland, Oregon. It's a liberal. You're looking at a liberal policy right here. That's what happened. If they had better control over what was going on, equal control, and again, the unfettered immigration, it's destructive. People are fed up. People are fed up with it. You want things to go back to the way they were in Ireland in the 80s? Keep it up. Keep it up. And it's a damn shame. It really is. But you know, they could just shut them down. They could do what they do in India. And I think this is interesting too. Here's one that a lot of people may not be aware of. And this also comes from AFP. Internet is out. India deploys shutdowns in name of security. And we'll get back to this in a second here. I thought a comment disappeared. Did somebody say something naughty? A comment disappeared. You know, YouTube will censor your comments as you place them. Their algorithm will read it before it goes up even. And if it doesn't like it, it'll kick your comment out. But a comment flashed and disappeared. I barely got a look at it. But here we go. Here's India. 100 days, no internet is what the sign says on this person's laptop. With the world's largest biometric ID database, a pioneering digital payment system for daily transactions, and a flagship space and satellite program, India knows the power of connected technology. But when trouble brews with political unrest of sectarian violence, authorities are quick to sever internet service to stem disinformation, cutting off millions of people who depend on the web for communication, information, and business. For authorities, and expected to be coming to a town near you soon. For authorities, internet shutdowns have become the first tool in their toolkit, said Indian online civil liberties activist Mishi Shodhe. Some blackouts last hours, others days, some stretch for months. In India's northeast Manipur state, more than 3 million people have been cut off from mobile internet service since clashes broke out in May. Did it jump? The tactic helps the government shape its narrative as no counter voices emerge, said Chaudhry, founder of the Software Freedom Law Center. But she said the authorities failed to understand what the impact would be. Human Rights Watch argues internet shutdowns disproportionately hurt the poorest who depend on the government's online social support systems. Nearly 121 million people were affected by the shutdowns last year, HRW said in a report in June. In the age of digital India, where the government has pushed to make internet fundamental to every aspect of life, the authorities instead use internet shutdowns as a default policing measure. In Indian administrated Kashmir, a 500-day blackout in 2019 and 2020 cost the economy more than $2.4 billion, according to the region's traders. Internet access is vital for realizing economic security, Access Now said. From market vegetable sellers to larger businesses dependent on online apps for payment, the loss of internet access stifles trade. Fascinating. So basically, and this is a model for other governments, they don't like you talking about something that goes against the government's narrative on a certain situation or circumstance. Your computers and your cell phones all go off en masse. No communication. Nobody can talk with each other. That's very totalitarian. Very much so. Ironically enough, the Indian government didn't start getting weird like this until after, and I can't remember her name, Gandhi's daughter was in charge. If I'm thinking of the right person, wasn't Gandhi's daughter like the Prime Minister of India? Is it a Prime Minister there now? I don't want to mix something up here, so correct me if I'm wrong. Flukeman says, surprised Ireland has come so low and soft considering the semi-awful treatments they received by the Brits. No kidding. No kidding. Well, keep in mind also Britain still has a lot of influence. And All People says when LBJ said he'd do something that would have N-word voting Democrat for the next 200 years, he wasn't saying he'd convert the slave descendants, but rather he'd replace them with migrants. Dragon says the Indian government blocks the internet because of security issues. They also block the internet to stop the spread of religious disputes. But do they have the right to do that? And is that a model for other countries? Could Australia start doing that? Could New Zealand start doing that? Canada, the United States, all across the Western world. Could they start doing that? Urban says the future is Morse code via ham radio on a mountaintop. It's going to have to be, because any government is capable of doing this. Canada's already working on it, actually. They're already censoring social media. There's certain things that you can't do or say anymore on social media in Canada. And they'll continue to tighten that. They're going to continue to tighten that as things move on. And that's scary times that we're in, that they can just shut you down. And yeah, it'll crush you. It's more than just we can't communicate. Almost all businesses on the internet now. So you can't access your bank. You can't call your parents. You can't, whatever you got to do, you can't do it. You can't do it because everybody is so codependent on their cell phones and on other types of wireless communication now. Gary says, do you mean Indira Gandhi? I think you're right. I think that might be right. It was Gandhi's daughter, right? And she was the leader of India, and she was brutal. She was brutal. Sharp contrast to how Gandhi came off. Am I thinking of the right person, Gary? Like I said, I'm not perfect here. And sometimes I can mix things up. And I want to act like I know everything. I don't. And, I try. I try. Try to stay on top of what I'm talking about, not muddle things too much. Fluke Man says, I was going to buy a ham radio, but you need a license. One day the government will send a signal to block ham radio signals. Well, you don't need a license to own one. You need a license to operate it. And Loyal says they can't do it all at once, so they scatter the reset changes and then start adopting them from all areas until every place is locked down and everyone is completely enslaved. And then Urban says part of the success of terrorist cells is their decentralized non-dependence on major internet network. On the ground, it's all basic signals work. Oh, and I see that Miss Granny Smith has moved into the chair. She was sitting under me for a while. I didn't notice she moved. She's very quiet. One more here, and I know this is the top news story. This is what they're all talking about right now. But I picked out something interesting from it. And this is from Fox News. Hamas releases 13 Israeli hostages, 11 others as ceasefire holds. And Gary says she was a PM at one point. I believe she was assassinated. I don't remember. But I think she was a prime minister. I couldn't remember if India was a prime minister or a president. I'm pretty sure it was a prime minister because I wanted to be sure. But my understanding was it was pretty tough to be under her authority. What's interesting about this? The terrorist group Hamas released the first wave of hostages, beginning a 4-day exchange that has paused the violence in Gaza. 24 hostages were transported out of Gaza via the Rafah border crossing on Friday, according to the Times of Israel, citing Israeli officials. At least 10 Thai nationals and 13 Israelis were released into the care of Red Cross personnel who were seen carrying those rescued via ambulance from Gaza into Egypt. The Israeli hostages were then expected to be transported to Israel to receive care at various hospitals. Qatar, a key player in the ceasefire deal negotiations, said 24 hostages have been released in total, including 10 Thai citizens and a Filipino citizen. Earlier, the Thai Foreign Ministry had said that 12 Thai citizens had been released by Hamas. Israel's government confirmed the names and ages of the Israeli hostages released, who is my understanding are all like kids and old people, right? This is what I think is interesting. So they let go. It says Israel and Hamas have agreed to a 4-day ceasefire during which the terrorist group will release 50 women and children taken in the October 7th attack on Israel in exchange for 150 Palestinians imprisoned by Israel. So they're going to give back 50 women and children for 150 kidnapped women and children for 150 Palestinian prisoners who were probably in prison for murder, terrorism, whatever. And of the 24 that have already been released, 10 of them are from Thailand and one is from the Philippines. Yeah, Gary confirms India has a PM. I think that's interesting. I think that's really interesting. But it's bad enough they kidnapped women and children in the first place. They probably kidnapped those women and children so that they could hold on to them for hostage exchanges to get some of their soldiers and other key people back. And it's unfortunate that an exchange like that even has to take place. And I'm sure that mostly it's due to exterior pressure, outside pressure from the EU, from the United Nations, and from the United States. And I think it's really interesting in this first grouping, again, that they got so many people from Thailand and the Filipino person. I guess they were tourists, but they kidnapped people from Thailand. I guess whatever you can get, right? That's just really interesting to me. That's really interesting to me. But yeah, the exchange is going on. They've got a ceasefire going. My understanding also, they were in a ceasefire during the attack, weren't they? I think there was a ceasefire in effect during the initial attack to begin with. Now we got that. Mountain says farm workers. That could be. That would make sense. And Ramos is here. But that's what I got, folks. That's what I've got. That's what I have for you today. Again, special thanks to Fluke Man for sending cat food to the PO box to help with our strays and our shelter cats that we help take care of. Helter says, I bet those hostages were forced at gunpoint to say they were treated well. Yeah, that does happen. Flukeman says, the left wonders why Central and Eastern Europe has little to zero terrorist attacks. And yeah. But again, special thanks to Fluke Man for sending cat food to the PO box. Helps a great deal. This is Coffee Talk, of course, or at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube, or Prepper University on YouTube, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, and Fistful of Radio, fistfulofradio.com. Podcasting out of Atlanta. You can find me there Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. So thank you, everybody who was able to join us this afternoon. Hope you got something out of the conversation. And with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up, and we will see you again on Monday.